Good evening, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. It's the fifth day of Diana Hrka's hunger strike in Serbia. The woman is demanding that those responsible for the death of her son and 15 other people in Novi Sad face justice amidst ongoing anti-government protests. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. The Polish foreign minister says that the war in Ukraine may last for 3 more years. The Polish central bank boosts the country's growth outlook, slashes inflation forecast. And the Swedish parliament lifts a moratorium on uranium mining. A presidential promise of snap elections, but no date. A pro-government rally with allegedly paid participants and a lack of accountability that led to a mother's hunger strike against corruption more than a year after the Novi Sad canopy collapse, which killed 16 people and sparked mass anti-government protests. Serbia is a divided country. Paweł Trzaskowski reports.
Miloš Vučević, the leader of the ruling Serbian Progressive Party, addresses the crowd in front of parliament on Wednesday night.
Some say that there are 2 Serbias, them and us, blockaders and anti-blockaders, left and right, whatever. There are no 2 Serbias. Serbia is one, indivisible.
But the crowd gathered in front of the parliament tells a different story, or rather, 2 crowds. One is a group of government supporters who in March this year set up a camp in front of the National Assembly. Local sources told me that the government pays these protesters up to €100 a day to join the group. Opposite them, separated by the riot police when tensions run high, gather the anti-government protesters. They have been coming here since Sunday to support this woman. Diana Hrka is the mother of one of the victims of the Novi Sad canopy collapse, a catalyst for the student-led anti-government protests that have been continuing for over a year now. Hrka is waging a hunger strike demanding government accountability for the tragedy. This is what she told me 3 days into her strike.
I'm trying to get the prosecution to do its job as much as I can. That's a start. I'm not going to give up my fight. I'm going to see it through to the end, whatever it takes.
This Thursday, she was still carrying on her fight. Growing crowds accompany her all day, and the protest movement, a year after it started, seems to be gaining momentum again. Students have been joined by academics
and professors if they have dignity and professional identity and political awareness. What else than to join students?
And farmers, motorcyclists and war veterans also attend the anti-government protests. They oppose corruption and state capture of the Serbian Progressive Party and the country's president Aleksandar Vučić. One of their demands is calling for snap elections. President Vučić did promise to hold them earlier than the scheduled date of late 2027, but without providing a specific time frame. That's why he keeps failing to appease the protesters and faces growing distrust.
Do you think he can be trusted?
He couldn't ever be trusted.
And the temperature of the country's internal conflict grows ever closer to the boiling point. Paweł Trzaskowski for TVP World.
Ukraine has launched more successful long-range attacks behind enemy lines to hurt the Russian economy and its military potential. And so we're joined now by our correspondent in Ukraine, Oskar Terji. Good evening, Oz. Ukraine has attacked a major oil refinery and a drone storage facility in Donetsk. Now, how effective are such strikes?
Well, the jury is still out on how effective Ukraine's deep strike strategy against Russian oil facilities has been going. Those numbers are quite hard to pass from outside of Russia. Only the Russian government can really tell you how much of an impact it's having on Russia's overall production. However, Ukraine certainly sees the benefit in it and continue to strike deep. Last night, in an overnight attack on a refinery in the Volgograd Oblast, more more than 400 kilometers away from the Ukrainian border. This is a Lukoil refinery that refines about 5% of Russia's total production of oil. And as you can see, the refinery on fire there reported from Russia. Now, there was also strikes in Volgorochensk and also in Crimea, an oil facility in Crimea that was targeted. That's the Russian-occupied peninsula. Now, we also understand, as you rightly said, there was a military attack on an airfield in Donetsk that has been used to house drones used routinely to bombard Ukrainian cities. So another successful attack by the Ukrainians. The impact is much harder to tell from the outside. The Ukrainians certainly feel confident that they are going to carry on this campaign against Russia's oil infrastructure, though.
Also, Ukraine attacks behind enemy lines, but the situation on the actual front line looks much more complicated. Will Ukraine withdraw its forces from Pokrovsk?
Well, there is heavy fighting in Pokrovsk, and Ukrainian analysts, the deep state, have said that the Russians are basically finding it quite easy to pour men into Pokrovsk now. So the situation is still very fluid there. However, Ukrainian forces have posted a video today showing footage of them raising a flag over a city council building in Pokrovsk. It's understood that there is still heavy fighting in the city. The question as to whether Ukraine withdraws or not is really one that the high command seems to be resisting. They seem very keen on trying to hold the line in Pokrovsk, at least for as long as possible. But things are understood to be very, very difficult for the Ukrainians there, with Russians advancing and having more and more success in that particular salient within the last few weeks.
That was Oskar Terji reporting from Kyiv. Thank you very much, Oz, and of course, stay safe. This war might end the way World War I ended, with one side losing the means to carry on, says Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski. But when would that happen, and can Ukraine withstand a Russian invasion until then? Kazimierz Łysiak reports.
The war in Ukraine is a war of attrition, with both Ukraine and Russia dug deep along the 1,200-kilometer front line. Little progress has been made by either side in the past 3 years. And according to the Polish foreign minister, Ukraine is ready for another 3.
Ukraine is planning to continue resisting for 3 years. Our job is to supply it with the resources to continue. And I think the process of the Russian economy suffering has started. And this war might end the way World War I ended. One side losing the means to carry on.
More than 1.5 million casualties in almost 4 years. That's the estimated human toll of Russia's invasion of Ukraine so far. 2/3 of that are Russian losses, including deaths and injuries. But it's not human losses which could prove crucial here.
Well, this can be stopped quite easily if West just start to use the economic and military power it has on its disposal. Russian war doesn't go well. Its economy is weak. We could easily give up enough sanctions to crush Russian economy.
In late October, US President Donald Trump unleashed economic measures against Russia's 2 largest oil producers, Rosneft and Lukoil. His response to Vladimir Putin refusing to end the fighting. While it will take some time for the effects of these latest sanctions to be visible,
if the sanctions are really implemented successfully, then we'll see the effects in the months, in a few months. For the time being, as far as the energy is concerned, we are seeing, first of all, the effects of the European sanction.
The effects of the sanctions implemented before, even taking into account Russia selling its oil and gas to Hungary, Slovakia, India and China, are tangible. According to a report by the British House of Commons, the joint EU, US and UK measures have stopped Russia from earning $450 billion since 2022. While Russia's gross domestic product remains relatively stable, that doesn't tell the whole story.
Inflation, exchange rates, altogether that means that the real income is probably falling. It's estimated that for example, the public investment has been reduced greatly to find money to finance the war.
All of this means that Putin now has to worry about the impact the war has on those around him.
So an implosion of Russia?
Or Russian leadership's conclusion that it cannot be won and that therefore serious peace talks are necessary. Putin would have to admit to himself that he made a terrible blunder, criminal decision to invade, that it hasn't been 3 days, it's been over 3 years, and that perhaps 3 more years of this is beyond Russia's means.
For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Łysiak.
The European Commission wants to allocate more than 500 billion euros to connect EU capitals by high-speed rail. The first connections are scheduled to be launched by 2030. Our EU correspondent Angela Skujins reports from Brussels.
The European Union wants to make it faster, cheaper and more efficient to travel across the continent via high-speed rail. We're talking about a 4-hour commute between Warsaw and Berlin and 6 hours between Athens and Sofia. This is according to a shiny new plan announced earlier this week from the Belgian capital. The aim here, however, is not just to shave hours off the commute, but to also connect the rest of Europe.
The idea is that these high-speed trains will gradually or can gradually replace aviation for the short flights, because it's easier to get on train and to read your book and to scroll down social media and be in another capital in a very short time.
But what are the speed bumps? Cost has been identified as the biggest problem here. One expert told TVP World he estimates that it will cost 540 billion euros to connect all the capitals via high-speed rail. Ensuring that there's enough political will and streamlined permitting processes are also crucial. This is to ensure that vulnerable regions such as Central and Eastern Europe, as well as the Baltics, aren't siloed with their own infrastructure projects, but are connected throughout the rest of Europe. This is demonstrated through the cross-country Rail Baltica project in the Baltic region.
They need to connect with Europe, so they cannot stop the border with Poland. I understand there are already plans and there are construction also to connect with Warsaw. And then they need to go to the rest of Europe. So if you are not connected and you do only you're an island, what we have today, you lose a lot of benefits.
Now, to ensure the pitch doesn't become a train wreck, the European Commission has identified 2027 as a pivotal year. This is the year that all the bottlenecks should be identified, as well as existing rail infrastructure that can accommodate trains travelling up to 250 kilometres per hour. But for now, it's up to the capitals to get on the fast track. Angela Skujins from Brussels for TVP World.
With steady economic growth and low inflation, Poland stands out among the European countries of the region. However, this Goldilocks economy can be threatened by a growing public sector deficit and a rapidly aging society. Maciej Wilowski reports.
The National Bank of Poland, the country's central bank, has drastically raised its economic growth forecasts for next year while lowering projections for inflation. Gross domestic product, a measure of the value of goods and services produced in the economy, is now forecast to rise over 3.6% next year, up considerably from the NBP's previous forecast of 3.1% issued in July. And inflation will likely run less hot than previously expected, averaging 2.9% compared to initial forecasts of 3.1%. With growth picking up and inflation slowing down, it's exactly the outcome NBP officials were hoping for.
So we have sort of a Goldilocks economy, which combines solid growth with stable inflation.
Last month's lower than expected inflation figure influenced the NBP's decision to cut interest rates on Wednesday.
Inflation has fallen to 2.8%. This is basically consistent, as you all know, with the NBP's target of 2.5%. It brings us significantly closer to this goal.
With Wednesday's cut, the NBP has now lowered interest rates 5 times this year. Lower rates stimulate the economy by reducing the cost of borrowing money for households and businesses. They also reduce interest payments on the national debt.
This reduction in interest rates by the National Bank of Poland lowers debt servicing costs. It's a very big relief for public finances.
The NBP's latest projections make Poland stand out among CEE countries with the highest projected growth rate in the region. Compared to its Central European peers, Poland's economy is larger and more diversified, allowing it to better withstand external shocks.
Polish economy is the largest one in Central Europe. So it allows the cycle to be more resistant to global shocks than in the case of smaller economies, which have more sectoral concentrations.
While the Polish economy may be doing well, warning signs linger beneath the surface. Public sector deficits and debt are on an alarming upward trajectory. And as the population ages, the Polish economy will need to confront a declining labor force.
Demographical factor, I believe, is one of the main issues that can influence further development.
While these challenges will certainly be felt more acutely in the future, for now, the Polish economy seems to be enjoying a golden age. Maciej Wilowski for TVP World.
Sweden will be mining its own uranium again, and the decision is aimed to boost Sweden's energy security, as it currently relies on deliveries from the US, Kazakhstan and, until 2022, Russia. Moreover, it raises questions whether the radioactive element could be used to enhance European defense capabilities. Konrad Gorliński has this report.
It is a major step, but it's a very natural step.
Since Sweden became a full member of NATO back in March of 2024, it's taken a very active role in the alliance, from increased patrols in the Baltic Sea and stronger cooperation with Baltic allies and Poland, to significant assistance to Ukraine, including the recent sale of 150 of Saab's Gripen fighter jets. And Sweden's change in posture does not end there. On Wednesday, the Swedish parliament voted to lift a moratorium on uranium mining that had been introduced in 2018 by Sweden's Social Democratic government. Now, Sweden is lifting the ban to secure independent sources of uranium for its reactors, as it's betting on nuclear to meet its green energy goals.
The banning of uranium mining was one of the consequences of anti-nuclear power strategy of government of that time. So the dark period for nuclear power is over.
The state-owned company Vattenfall AB previously bought Russian uranium, but these deliveries were halted in 2022 after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
Self-sustainability, also in nuclear field, is a very important issue politically. Nuclear power gives you a guarantee to be very much independent of the fuel, if you have your own fuel.
Sweden currently operates 6 nuclear reactors and plans to expand capacity in the coming decade to meet rising demand for electricity. But some are looking back to Sweden's nuclear weapons program, which was halted in the late 1960s, and so are speculating otherwise. Recently declassified documents show that by 1965, Sweden was actually 6 months away from building a bomb. Sweden's signing of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1968 led to the program's final wind-down in 1972. Now, Stockholm agreed to give up the program in response to American security assurances. But as the value of these assurances dwindles, speculation of a possible Swedish renewal is rearing its head.
Oh, Sweden was so close, so maybe they keep this option open. No, they don't. And there is no any reason to have any ban on the uranium exploitation. And there is no any single reason that the mining of uranium has something to do with the nuclear weapon program.
Now, uranium on its own is not enough to build a bomb. Heavy water is needed to produce plutonium, a key ingredient in bomb production. Now, Sweden shut down its last hard water pool reactor in 1973.
I can guarantee you, as a person insider in the nuclear field, there is no competence, there is no suitable equipment to make.
Nonetheless, Sweden is preparing for a new reality, and the news was celebrated by mining companies and District Metals in particular, which owns the Viken deposits, said to contain up to 27% of Europe's known sources of uranium. The Swedish decision clears the way for renewed domestic extraction starting on January 1st, 2026. For TVP World, I'm Konrad Gorliński.
And as Sweden is back to uranium mining, Russia is back to nuclear weapons testing. And to talk about the recent atomic tensions between the West, Russia and China, we're joined by Tomasz Noć, Senior Research Fellow for Nuclear, Space and Missile Defense at Globsec. Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for accepting our invitation. Now, first, let's look at the sequence of the events over the past 10 days. So first, Vladimir Putin announced a successful test of the intercontinental Burevestnik or Stormbringer missile. Then came the news of his doomsday device, that's the Poseidon nuclear torpedo with no known Western countermeasures to it. In response, Donald Trump resumes nuclear arms tests for the first time in 30 years. And now Vladimir Putin is ordering preparations for Russia's own nuclear tests. Now, are the two biggest nuclear powers of the world playing a game of chicken?
Well, I think you have very rightly identified the action-reaction dynamics that has been unraveling in the past couple of days. And this is, I think it's a slightly broader thing. What I would include into kind of a broader political picture is the fact that when Donald Trump returned to power, he had big hopes of closing deals with Russia. So if you look back what happened in the past couple of months, we see that it doesn't really seem to be the case. There was an opening, or seemed to be an opening vis-a-vis Russia, and a hope for a negotiated settlement of war in Ukraine. But the events of the previous weeks and months have clearly showed that Russia is not at this point interested in any kind of negotiated settlement, in a settlement that would be perceived by the electorate of Vladimir Putin as something advantageous to Russia. The preference is continue fighting, and that's not what the Americans want to see. And if in the current setting, in the given setting, you also see the test of two long-range nuclear delivery systems that, if in the future, if they will be deployed and if they will play some part in Russia's nuclear strategy, it seems very likely that that part will be oriented to counter U.S. weapons and hold targets on the U.S. continent at risk. That's the reason, why these kind of weapons are actually even being created. So it doesn't really go well with the American president. And if you look at the events from the perspective of Donald Trump, you also see a radical modernization and nuclear build-up on the side of China. China is expanding its inventory of nuclear warheads, and this autumn it had organized a huge military parade where it has for the first time showed its entire nuclear triad, and it have shows a number of new systems, very ambitious systems, and presumably pretty capable systems that can hold targets at risk either in the Asia region, including targets that are really important for the US, and also to hold at risk targets on the continental United States. So from the US perspectives, things are moving, but the US policy is still pretty static. And that's not a criticism, actually, it's a good thing. But there you have a political leader who is famous for seeking the initiative anytime it's possible. And here, I think he felt the temptation to do something, and that's the reason why we had for the first time in 30 years, actually, a US president talking about the possibility of returning to nuclear testing. To be fully transparent, the US actually tests nuclear weapons. It tests the delivery that delivers the warhead, whether it's an intercontinental ballistic missile or submarine.
But the Russians are already talking about full-blown nuclear tests, which I guess that involves a nuclear detonation. Now, the new START, which is not new anymore, but the treaty between the US and Russia, it expires in 3 months. So what happens next? Will Washington and Moscow just resume this Cold War nuclear arms race, including full-blown test explosions?
So yes, the treaty will expire during the first week of February, and if it's not formally, it should not be, you shouldn't be able to extend it because the provision of the treaty has already been used once. But informally, it can be extended in a sense that both sides will decide to adhere to some of the treaty limits, and the Russians are actually offering this, probably with an expectation that the Americans will not agree with that, and that will be basically giving them a free ride possibility to do whatever they seek to do. And nuclear testing might be one of the takeaways from these processes, because it's pretty clear that Russia is interested in investing in nuclear weapons, also as a way how to ensure the domestic population and how to do effective propaganda. Nuclear weapons are pretty popular within the Russian society, and it's a symptomatic sign of Russian strength.
Oh, I'm very glad you've mentioned this aspect.
Better you are.
Yes, because Russia has recently resumed its disinformation campaign, accusing Ukraine and NATO of a plot of a nuclear disaster, plotting a nuclear disaster in Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and also to kill some of their own citizens and then blame it on Moscow. Now, the absurdity of these accusations aside, could Russia be in fact planning a false flag nuclear incident in Ukraine?
That's possible theoretically, but I don't think it's very practically viable option for the Russians, because simply it would be very difficult for them to deny the data behind it. I think to believe that the Ukrainians would do this to their own territory, to their own installation, which legally is theirs, and they want to keep it even after the war, it's very unlikely. It's, theoretically, the Russians will do this kind of campaigns, and they have been doing this kind of campaign just to test, whether it gets traction or not. We had in the past allegations of the Ukrainians trying to create a dirty bomb and doing something similar and blaming the Russians. And that wasn't really a successful campaign. So I think this is a second iteration of that, and I wouldn't really pay much attention to it. It's probably just propaganda.
Sweden resumes the extraction of uranium to boost its energy independence from the US and Russia, Kazakhstan as well. But could this uranium be used for Europe's military purposes too?
Well, I don't think that there is any kind of political traction in that direction. The way how I'm reading it is that Sweden wants to have its own independent way of producing a nuclear material for their energy needs that are growing. Sweden is already heavily reliant on nuclear energy, and want to stick to this kind of trajectory, which is, I think, perfectly understandable. Sweden has joined NATO. NATO is a nuclear alliance. For the first time, Sweden has participated in NATO's annual flying exercise. It's taking part at consultations on nuclear deterrence. It's part of the same compact as Slovakia and Poland, and I think it's already an upgrade compared to where Sweden has been before its accession to NATO. And going into kind of full-fledged weaponization with creating a European nuclear weapon program or a Swedish weapon program, that's just a very distant reality currently. There is no political appetite, and there is, frankly speaking, in my judgment, no need to think in that direction.
And lastly, very shortly, you've mentioned the Chinese new nuclear weapons, or the long-range missiles displayed at the last parade. And last year, China's Xi Jinping and the then US President Joe Biden agreed that all decisions concerning the use of nuclear arms should be human-made. Now, Russia, however, is threatening the West with its dead hand system. Now, the system is supposedly designed to automatically launch nukes in case of a military conflict and its leader being eliminated, right? So that's in case if Vladimir Putin is not responsive. Now, is it a bluff? Or is Russia ready to really burn the world if attacked?
Well, first of all, this is not a new system. This is a kind of legacy system from the Cold War, which is being updated on a regular basis. And it is specifically made in a way that it really needs to identify the set of nuclear detonations happening, and at the same time to have a political decapitation. So the situation that would require for the system to be kind of even considered to be launched is like a full-blown nuclear attack on Russia, which is not going to happen in our lifetime unless Russia kind of initiates something similar on the West. And in that case, we are already in a full-fledged nuclear war. And whether these weapons are launched automatic manner or someone who has in a subordinate position within the Russian political or military class does the same, it doesn't make that much difference at that apocalyptic point. But this is really something that shouldn't really bother us in a daily manner, I would say.
Something that hopefully will never happen. Tomasz Noć, Senior Research Fellow for Nuclear, Space and Missile Defense at Globsec, was our guest this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching and stay with us for more news and interviews here on TVP World.